The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a burst of icy Brooklyn air that met the feverish heat of Rachel Bennett's body. She barely noticed the entrance chime. Her entire focus was on the small boy pressed against her chest. Noah, just over a year old, burned with fever beneath a too-thin blanket. Rachel, 29, looked worn down by life. Her waitress uniform, a white shirt yellowed with age and tight black pants faded from too many washes, clung to her slender frame. Sleepless nights and worry were carved into her hollow eyes. She trembled, not from the cold, but from fear, the helpless, gnawing fear of not being able to help her child. Noah whimpered softly, his breathing uneven. She crossed the pharmacy, barely noticing the two customers whispering by the vitamin shelf. Her eyes locked onto the counter where a young clerk stood, typing idly on a computer. His name badge read Mark. "Please," she said, her voice barely steady. "He has a fever, almost 104. I need the children's amoxicillin, the suspension. I can pay by the end of the week, I promise." Mark looked up, startled. His eyes flicked from her worn appearance to the flushed baby in her arms. He hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," he said, tone flat. "Without a prescription or payment, I can't help you." Rachel blinked, stunned. "I'm not asking for charity. I get paid Thursday. I'll leave my ID. Anything. Just please. He's getting worse." Mark looked nervously at the camera above. One mistake could cost him his job. "It's a controlled medication. I'm not allowed to—" "I have no one else," Rachel interrupted, her voice cracking. "The hospital said the pediatrician won't be in until next week. He's had this fever since yesterday, and it won't break." Realizing she was shouting, she stopped. The pharmacy had fallen silent. One man stared at her with pity. A woman near the checkout shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Noah like he was contagious. Rachel felt her face flush with shame. Her body tightened as she held Noah close, whispering, "Okay, I'm sorry. It's my fault." Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to leave, angry not at the clerk or even the store, but at the cruel system that failed people like her. Just then, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the air. "What's going on here?" Rachel froze. The voice came from behind. She turned, instinctively shielding Noah. The man stood tall, dressed in a tailored black overcoat. His shoes shined. His eyes were a clear, cool gray. Logan Matthews, owner of the pharmacy chain and a millionaire. Though she didn't know that yet. He looked entirely out of place, like a scene from another world crashing into hers. "Nothing," she muttered, avoiding his eyes. "I'm sorry. I was leaving." Logan studied her for a long, quiet moment. He saw the dark circles, the sweat on the baby's brow, the silent terror in the mother's trembling. He stepped forward. "He's burning up," he said calmly. "Let me see him." Rachel hesitated. There was no reason to trust this stranger, but something in his voice was firm yet kind. Carefully, she pulled back the blanket. Noah's face was flushed, his eyes dull and half open. Logan reached out and felt the baby's forehead. "At least 104, he murmured. "Did you give him anything?" "Acetaminophen. It worked yesterday, but he threw it all up this morning." Logan turned to Mark. "Why doesn't she have the medication?" Mark faltered. She doesn't have a prescription or the money." The atmosphere shifted. Logan's calm held the weight of command. Rachel realized then, his authority wasn't about wealth. It came from knowing exactly how to take control. "This is my business," he said, voice like a blade. "If anyone here is sick, it's that policy. From now on, in emergencies, we help first." He pulled out his phone and called directly. "Get Dr. Harris here, now." Rachel watched, stunned. She didn't know if she should thank him or run. No rich man had ever paused his world for someone like her. Noah coughed weakly. Rachel rocked him gently, trying to soothe him. Logan observed her, and something shifted in his expression. Softened, just barely. "Did you come here alone?" he asked. "My shift ended an hour ago. I took the subway straight here. My roommate helped check his temperature. I don't have anyone else." "And his father?" Rachel swallowed. That question hit like a punch, but she chose the simplest answer. "He's not in his life," Rachel said quietly. Logan didn't press further. He just nodded. Yet his eyes revealed something deeper, a flicker of restrained anger, and a kind of silent empathy, like a man who knew exactly what abandonment felt like. For the first time, Rachel looked at him not as a stranger, but as someone who might understand. Behind the polished exterior, there was sadness in his expression, and maybe even loneliness, the kind she had grown far too familiar with. A staff member approached cautiously. Logan turned to them with steady authority. "Take them to the back. Get cold towels, water, and somewhere that baby can rest. Now." Rachel stared at him, stunned. She looked down at Noah, then back at the man standing before her. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." The pharmacy's back room was no clinic, but Logan Matthews transformed it in minutes. Clean towels, a soft pillow, cold compresses, a digital thermometer, and a bottle of water appeared almost instantly. A portable heater hummed to life, cutting through the chill. It was all improvised, but done with the kind of care only someone who truly understood crisis would show. Rachel settled into a worn armchair with Noah in her lap. His fever was still high, but he'd stopped crying. Perhaps even he could sense. Something had finally changed. She stroked his damp hair gently, scanning the room like someone afraid this moment might vanish. Logan hadn't said much since calling the pediatrician, but he had moved with quiet precision, commanding without raising his voice. When Dr. Harris arrived, an older man with a kind face and calm voice, Logan offered only what was necessary. "High fever since yesterday, vomiting this morning. He's dehydrated. Do what you need to." Rachel glanced at Logan. "Do you know him?" "He was my goddaughter's pediatrician," Logan replied. No explanation beyond that. Then he turned to leave. "I'll give you two some space." Rachel watched him walk out, already speaking on the phone. Only then did she realize she'd been holding her breath. Everything felt surreal. Dr. Harris examined Noah with the calm assurance of long experience. Temperature, throat, lungs, ears. A few quick notes on his phone. A fast-acting liquid antibiotic. Clear instructions. The diagnosis, a viral infection with early bacterial complications. The timing had been critical, but Rachel's thoughts kept drifting back to Logan. Who was he really? Why had he helped her, a stranger, without asking for anything in return? He didn't look at her with pity, and there was no quiet judgment in his eyes, or was there something he wasn't saying? When Dr. Harris finished and promised to check in the next day, Rachel stood with Noah, now asleep in her arms, breathing easier, resting. She stepped into the hallway and caught sight of Logan at the far end, near the back exit, deep in a phone call. His voice, usually calm, now sounded sharp, tense, angry. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but then she heard her name. "No, I already said I don't care about my father's inheritance," Logan snapped. "And tell my sister, I'm not coming back. Not now. Not ever." Rachel froze. Inheritance? Sister? What kind of man turns his back on wealth and family? She stepped away quietly, unsettled. She returned to the front bench, cradling Noah, the blanket warm against them both. When Logan reappeared minutes later, his expression was calm again, but his eyes still carried the weight of something unspoken. He stopped in front of her. Rachel looked up, guarded. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Logan knelt beside her so they were eye level. "Because I can," he said softly. He glanced at Noah. "And because no baby should suffer because of money." Rachel swallowed hard. He meant it. She could feel that. But still, people don't just do good things for no reason, she whispered. There's always something they want. What do you want? Logan's eyes flickered. Pain? A memory? He stood slowly. I don't want anything, he said. Maybe, just to make up for someone I couldn't help. Rachel didn't understand, but she didn't ask more. His words were heavy, too heavy to be fake. Silence fell between them, but this time it wasn't tense. It was something different. A pause between two people from opposite worlds, thrown together by chance or fate. As Rachel adjusted Noah in her arms and prepared to leave, Logan stopped her again with a quiet question. Rachel, do you have plans tomorrow? She stared at him, surprised. Why? Logan gave the smallest of smiles, serious but gentle. Because I'd like to show you this wasn't just luck. The diner was humming with routine. Grease hissed on the griddle, coffee pots bubbled, and Rachel stood by the tables with a crumpled notepad and tired eyes. Her feet ached in worn-out flats. Her apron already bore the evidence of the shift: coffee, grease, and exhaustion. It was supposed to be just another night, but Rachel couldn't stop thinking about Logan. That impossible gesture, those eyes carrying something she still couldn't name, and the question he'd left hanging in the air. Do you have plans for tomorrow? She hadn't answered. Honestly, her only plan was to make it through another day. Then the little bell above the door rang. She looked up and froze. Logan Matthews walked in, immaculate dark suit, elegant coat, hair tousled slightly by the breeze. He didn't walk into that diner like a man visiting a cheap Brooklyn cafe. He crossed into her world like someone stepping through a divide. Her heart skipped. Relief? Unease? Both. He gave a small smile and sat at the counter. I came to see how Noah's doing, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Is he better? Rachel nodded, fumbling with a clean mug. He's sleeping like an angel. First time in days he hasn't woken up crying. A visible wave of relief passed over Logan's face. He meant it. That still surprised her. Rich men didn't usually care about children they didn't know. Want some coffee? She asked, just to say something. Only if it's made by you. She laughed, soft, surprised, and began to prepare it. Logan watched, not in that way men sometimes watched women, but with quiet attention, like he wanted to memorize the normalcy. She slid the cup across the counter. The aroma filled the space between them. You make a good coffee, he said after a sip. Strong, straightforward, like you. She raised an eyebrow, trying not to smile. And are you always like this? Rescuing damsels in distress? Logan leaned in, elbows on the counter. Only the ones brave enough to face the world alone, and still managed to smile. Rachel looked away. This was dangerous. Men like him didn't come to places like this just for coffee. Before she could reply, the door burst open again. A tall man strode in, expensive blazer, Rolex flashing under the sleeve, voice booming. Logan Matthews, he shouted, like spotting a long-lost brother. Logan stood. They embraced briefly, familiar but not intimate. Andrew, Logan said, guarded. Man, people still talk about you at the club, Andrew went on. Saw you on the Forbes cover last month. He turned to Rachel, suddenly noticing her. He hasn't told you, has he? Told me what? She asked, instantly wary. Andrew laughed, clapping Logan on the back. This guy, he's the heir to the Matthews pharmaceutical empire, one of the biggest fortunes in New York. It's his. Well, his father's technically, but Logan here should be running the whole thing. If he weren't so rebellious. Rachel froze. Logan looked down, didn't deny it. Andrew went on about a party and left just as loudly as he'd arrived. He took the noise with him, but left behind a heavy silence. Rachel stared at Logan like she was seeing him for the first time. He sat back down slowly. I didn't want you to find out like that, he said, voice low. It's not something I talk about. Why not? Because people change when they know. They start to expect things. Or worse, they start to fear you. Rachel bit her lip. It all made sense now. He wasn't just a kind man behind a pharmacy counter. He was powerful, wealthy, untouchable. And yet, he hadn't walked away. She turned to wipe the counter, cloth in hand, trying to steady herself. Logan didn't move. He gave her space. He understood. Finally, she stood in front of him again, eyes searching. Why are you really here, Logan? He was quiet, then finally with rare vulnerability. Because when I saw you holding your son, begging for help, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It reminded me of who I used to be, before all this. She didn't know what to say. When Logan left that night, Rachel walked to the door and watched him disappear into the dark street. The wind pulled at her apron, her hair. What does a man so far from my world want with me? She whispered. What she didn't know was, Logan was asking himself the same thing, and he didn't have the answer either. Across town in a penthouse high above the city, Logan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the lights blur below. The skyline was on fire with the last gold of a descending sun, but his mind was elsewhere. Rachel, her tired eyes, that baby clutched in her arms, the quiet desperation she carried with such grace. He hadn't felt this way in years, not since the loss of his nephew, his sister's son, taken too soon, leaving behind a silence no fortune could fill. When he first saw Noah, sick and vulnerable, something broke open, something he had buried, and now it wouldn't stay buried. He turned from the window, picked up his phone, and dialed. Later that evening, Rachel was moving between tables, sleeves rolled, sweat gathering at her temples. Logan appeared again, more casual this time, but still the same composed presence. "Rachel," he said gently. She turned surprised again. He hesitated, then smiled. "I'd like to invite you and Noah for a picnic. Just the three of us, in Central Park." "A picnic?" she repeated, stunned. "Now?" She glanced at the stroller where Noah dozed, cheeks flushed, his tiny brow furrowed even in sleep. "Yes," Logan said, hopeful but calm. "Just some fresh air and space to talk." She didn't answer right away. Life didn't usually offer soft things, not to her, and especially not from men like him. But something inside her, tired, wary, yet curious, wanted to say yes. Wants custody. Rachel's heart dropped. The words on the page blurred as her hands began to shake. After all this time, months of silence, of vanishing without a trace, he reappeared not to ask how Noah was doing, not to apologize, but to demand. She stared blankly at the letter. The arrogance of it, the cruelty. Noah, innocent and unaware, babbled softly nearby, holding a worn toy rabbit, and she looked at him, her whole world wrapped up in that tiny body, that trusting smile. The thought of losing him made it hard to breathe. She picked up her phone and dialed, her fingers trembling. "Logan," she said when he answered. He heard it immediately in her voice. "I'll be there in 10, he replied. When he arrived, she didn't say a word, just handed him the letter. His jaw tightened as he read it, but he didn't curse, didn't lash out. He simply looked at her, steadied her. "We're not going to let this happen," he said quietly, resolute. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." Rachel nodded, tears beginning to well in her eyes, but this time they didn't fall from fear. They fell because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying the weight alone. He had said he wanted to meet his son, that he was ready to take responsibility. In his words lay an unmistakable hint. He'd already hired lawyers to start a custody battle. He spoke of financial stability, proper housing, and a better future, as if these promises were meant more as a threat than an offer. In that moment, Rachel's world spun. Everything, every small victory, every sacrifice she had made to protect Noah, now felt at risk. Clutching her son tightly, her heart pounded with that old, familiar fear. Later that very night, almost on impulse, she called Logan. On the other end of the line, his trembling voice was enough for him to say, "I'm coming." Within minutes, he arrived at her door. Wordless, she let him in. Together, they moved to the living room where, still holding Noah, Rachel silently handed him the letter. Logan read it in silence, his eyes narrowing with concentration. After a pause, he looked up. "He wants to take Noah," Rachel finally whispered, voice quivering. "And he has money, lawyers." "I have nothing," she added, collapsing onto the sofa as tears streamed down her face. "I have nothing but him." Logan knelt beside her, grasping her hand with a firmness that contrasted his gentle tone. "You have me," he vowed, "and I won't let them take Noah away from you." Outside, the rain began to fall harder, its patter a backdrop to their shared resolve. Inside, amidst her fear and uncertainty, Rachel felt something shift, a small spark of hope. For the first time, she wasn't fighting this battle alone. Without delay, Logan set his plan into motion. Once Rachel had gathered herself, he was already on the phone. Within 24 hours, he had enlisted one of New York's most respected family lawyers, Mark Callahan, a discreet, ethical man who had loyally served Logan since his youth. "Let's do this the right way," Logan said quietly after hanging up. "But our way, Rachel. He's not taking Noah from you. Not while I'm breathing." In the days that followed, strategy and routine blended into their new life. They met almost every afternoon, sometimes in the cramped living room of her modest apartment, other times in Mark's private office. They pored over custody documents, evidence of abandonment, and every shred of proof that Rachel had fought to give Noah the best care possible. It was exhausting and clinical, but every detail mattered. Yet amid the dry legalities, something tender began to grow. Between folders of documents and short breaks to soothe Noah, Rachel and Logan discovered a quiet, unspoken complicity. Logan, who had initially seemed like just a well-meaning benefactor, found himself laughing at Noah's silly faces while changing diapers, delivering hot meals to the restaurant when Rachel had forgotten to eat, and joining her on the living room floor to teach Noah how to stack colorful blocks as if that were the most important lesson in the world. For Rachel, the guarded distance slowly began to wane. The scar of abandonment would never vanish entirely, but with each small act of care, she felt the fragile thread of trust stretching further between them. One particularly cold night, after Noah finally drifted into sleep following a teething fit, they sat side by side on the couch. The TV played softly in the background, while a gentle lamp cast delicate shadows upon Logan's face. Curiosity and affection danced in Rachel's eyes as she broke the silence. "You're very quiet tonight," she murmured with a gentle smile. Logan slowly met her gaze, his light eyes unwavering. "There's something I need to say," he began, voice rough with honesty. "I never expected I could care this much." A pause, heavy with unspoken emotion, settled between them before Rachel replied softly, "Me neither." It's strange how life makes you open up when you least expect it. For a few precious seconds, their shared bubble of peace felt untouchable. Then the next morning, during a meeting with Mark Callahan at the Manhattan Legal Center, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. Logan had arrived a bit early, reviewing documents, when Mark's tone grew serious as he mentioned a name that cut through the room like a cold blade. Richard Matthews, Logan's father. After a brief call, Mark's expression tightened. "We need to talk, Logan," he said bluntly. "I just confirmed something complicated." Logan's eyes narrowed as he listened. Mark explained, carefully choosing his words. "Your ex's father, who now funds this legal action through third parties, is indirectly financing the case through one of your father's holdings. They're using your refusal of the inheritance, your distancing from the Matthews empire, and even your sister for control." The news hit Logan hard. His calm resolve shifted to restrained anger. He stood slowly, fists clenched at his sides. What began as silent indignation now boiled with fury. In his mind, he pictured Rachel, fragile yet fiercely protective of Noah, and the trust she had placed in him. The weight of responsibility doubled with the threat now looming over them. "This just got very personal," Logan said, jaw clenched, shoulders squared. In that moment, he knew it wasn't just about protecting Rachel anymore. It was about ending the cycle of manipulation that had followed him for years. It was about proving he could choose differently, choose better, choose love. That morning, the sky hung low and gray, the chill in the air hinting at more than just weather. It was as if fate itself paused, waiting. Rachel stood on the sidewalk in front of family court, her simple coat buttoned to the neck. Noah cradled in her arms, wrapped in a light blue blanket. Her eyes locked on the building's wide gray steps, equal parts dread and hope. Beside her stood Logan Matthews, dressed in a flawless dark suit, but his gaze was fixed only on her and the child in her arms. He took her hand firmly. "Whatever happens in there," he said, voice steady, "we face it together." Rachel could only nod. Her chest ached, not just from fear, but from the weight of everything she had carried alone for so long. But today, she wasn't alone. Their footsteps echoed through the cold marble halls, tension thick in the air. At the courtroom entrance, Mark Callahan was already waiting, reviewing papers with his assistant. He gave them a sharp nod. Then she saw him, Daniel, dressed in an expensive suit, hair perfectly styled, a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. And behind him, like a shadow darker than any storm, stood Richard Matthews. It was the first time Rachel saw Logan's father. The effect was instant, tall, imposing. His elegance was a mask, his eyes cold, calculating. He looked straight at Logan with a smirk. There's still time to back down, you know that, he murmured, venom in every word. Logan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The tension between them said enough. The hearing began. The judge, a poised African-American woman with a commanding presence, surveyed the courtroom with practiced eyes. She had seen hundreds of cases, but this one would cut deeper. Mark presented first, evidence of abandonment, medical records, receipts, testimonials. Rachel's life laid bare in documents that told a story of sacrifice and resilience. Then it was the defense's turn. Daniel took the stand, words smooth and rehearsed. He spoke of remorse, newfound stability, wanting the best for his son. A narrative stitched together to cover months, years of absence. Rachel sat still, fists clenched in her lap. Then the judge called Logan. He crossed the courtroom slowly, not as a tycoon, not as a Matthews, but as a man changed. A man who had chosen a family not of blood, but of love. "Mr. Matthews," the judge asked, "why are you so involved in this case?" He turned toward Rachel, toward Noah, still asleep in her arms, and then back to the judge. "I'm here because I won't let another child be used as a bargaining chip," he said, voice steady but trembling. "I lost someone once, my nephew. My sister lost her child, and I lost him with her. I couldn't do anything then. I was powerless." A pause. "But when I saw that baby in the pharmacy, sick, held by a mother, doing everything she could, I knew I couldn't walk away again." He took a breath. "Since then, I've seen what a real mother looks like. One who fights every day even with nothing. She never gave up. Not once." He glanced at Rachel. "I'm not here for a vanity fight. I'm here because this," he gestured gently toward her and Noah, "is the life I want. This is the family I choose." He reached for Rachel's hand, holding it tightly, then softly touched Noah's head. Silence blanketed the room. Then Richard Matthews stood. "My son is making a mistake," he said coolly, "throwing away a legacy, an inheritance, all for a fleeting distraction. This isn't about family," he added, voice sharp. "This is about rebellion." Logan turned slowly, eyes icy. "What I'm rejecting," he said loud enough for the room to still again, "is an empire built on silence and shame. You've tried to control me since Mom died, but it ends today." Rachel looked at him, her eyes wet. She had never seen him like this, so raw, so strong, so entirely himself. The judge called a recess. The next moments stretched endlessly. Rachel trembled. Logan sat beside her, one arm wrapped around her, the other hand still holding hers. An anchor in the storm. When the judge returned, her verdict was brief, clear. Based on the testimony, documentation, and history presented, this court grants full custody of the child to the mother, Rachel Bennett. The petition for custody review is denied. Rachel gasped. A sob caught in her throat. Her body folded forward over Noah, who stirred slightly, then fell asleep again in her arms. Across the courtroom, Daniel left without a word, and Richard Matthews, expression unreadable, simply straightened his jacket and walked away. Another pawn sacrificed in a game of control. But for Rachel and Logan, it was everything. Outside under the pale afternoon sky, they walked side by side. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Each breath, each step was part of something new. Then as Rachel tucked the blanket around Noah, Logan leaned closer. "Let's build a real life," he said softly. "Just ours." Rachel looked up at him, eyes still shining, but now with peace. A smile began at her lips and traveled all the way to her heart. And so beneath the gray New York sky, their new story began. What did this story mean to you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and how you'd rate this story, 0 to 10. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable journeys. See you in the next story.